Welcome back to another episode of Microdose with TheMoDose Cannabis. I'm your host Mo, and today we are back in the kitchen and we are making a THC Infused Margarita with a THC Infused Salt rim. And let me just pause there and say, if there is one thing my mommy loves, besides me and my sister, it is a really good quality margarita. Now, she's not big on the THC, and that's fine, I guess, but I definitely want to make her proud with this recipe. So let me just also say to all of you at home following along that I'm going to be using an alcohol-based tincture. If you choose to make a virgin version of this, I'm recommending that you use vegetable glycerin as your base for your infusion. So infuse the vegetable glycerin for this recipe. I'm recommending that because it is also water soluble, which means it'll dissolve really nicely into our margarita. So let's get into the actual recipe. All right, so let's quickly talk about the type of infusion that we're gonna be using for this recipe. So I'm gonna be using a Golden Dragon tincture. I have a really quick recipe on this and it takes about 30 minutes or less if you've already decarbed your cannabis. It's really quick and easy. Yes, this is alcohol based, so if you are trying to serve this to somebody who does not drink alcohol, this is not gonna be the option for you. As I mentioned, you can use vegetable glycerin, but I do wanna make two notes. It does not have as long as a shelf life, so if you're making a bigger batch, just keep that in mind. And then two, the extraction tends not to be as strong as an alcohol-based tincture, but again, you can always add more to offset that. I also want to note that if you see recipes or you want to infuse your tequila directly, you can do that. But you also have to keep in mind that most tequilas are usually about 100 to 120 proof maximum. There might be one or two that will get you to 150 proof, but you should be very careful when you're selecting your tequila so you know exactly what you're using, because you want to start your proof at 150 if possible. Anything below that will start to weaken the extraction. Again, you can do it, but just keep in mind that it's recommended that you keep your infusions at 150 or above, okay? And with that being said, I'm gonna move forward with my Golden Dragon tincture. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with our THC infused salts. You're gonna wanna do this a few days prior to your recipe so that you give your ingredients time to dry and mix together properly. You're only gonna need 2 ingredients, and that is your tincture. So again, I'm using my Golden Dragon tincture here, but you can use any tincture, and then coarse salt. And you wanna make sure it's coarse so that when the two mix together, that this salt doesn't actually dissolve. If you are going to be making this recipe, please note that you have to use alcohol base for the salt. So you can make the recipe with the vegetable glycerin, but if you're doing the salt, it has to be alcohol based, okay? All right, so with that being said, all I'm gonna do is do a 2-to-1 ratio on these 2 ingredients here. So I'm gonna do 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, 2 hefty teaspoons, I guess. And then 1 teaspoon of our tincture. Okay, then we're gonna mix it together and you're gonna get this consistency like it's wet sand almost. Mix it all up, mix it up. Give it a nice thin layer. And voila. And so what I like to do, I'm gonna step out of frame for just a second, is put a single coffee filter on top of this while this continues to dry out for about 3 days or so. And so you just come back every so often and just give it a nice mix to make sure that everything is kind of even and nothing is like getting too clunky together. But then you just put that to the side and then we'll have our THC infused salt. All right, so we're gonna get down to it. First things first, I have my THC infused salt. that I made a few days ago. I'm just gonna pour this on a plate. This is like my new favorite way to microdose. All right, put that to the side. I've got my cup. I have a lime wedge. And I'm just gonna actually lime half of the glass because I like to decide if I want to use salt or just drink normal. So I just do half at a time. So I do the lime wedge on one side to get it nice and sticky. And then I just go ahead and roll it in that salt. All right, beautiful. I'm just gonna put this to the side. So I now have my shaker with ice. I've got 4 or 5 lemons. I need about 3 tablespoons, so I just cut those in half. You can either squeeze them by hand or you can use one of these juicers that are super inexpensive, but they look super fancy. I do recommend that if you're squeezing, you know, your limes fresh, which I do recommend, that you keep your limes at room temperature. You can get more of the juice out of the lime at room temperature versus just pulling them right out of the fridge. Pro tip. Perfect. All right. And then we are also going to add our star of the show, our tincture. I'm gonna add just a little under, between 1 and 1.5 ounces of our tincture, based on the strength that I've made mine. Completely optional, but I made some simple syrup, which is 1 part water, 1 part sugar, and you boil it. Wait till that, you know, comes to a boil and then you let it cool. I'm gonna use just a little. I'm gonna use about 1/2 ounce for sweetener. You can adjust, you know, you can use agave instead, totally up to you. I also like to use about 1 ounce of sparkling water. Well, it's 1.5 ounces, who's counting? And 1/2 of a fresh orange. And then you can of course add regular tequila or whatnot if you'd like. Totally up to you. Give it a good shake. Oh gosh, okay, stop me. All right, so I grabbed a nice big ice cube for my margarita and woo. Oh, this looks and smells so good. Oh, and let's go ahead. Got 1 lime. Let's give it a little twirl. Throw it in there. Gorgeous. And I will see y'all later. Cheers to all of you. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll see you here next time for the next recipe. In the meantime, I'm gonna see y'all later.